Welcome, everyone. Today, we are getting into the science of mastering a new language. If you've ever had that feeling of frustration with grammar, or you're trying to hear sounds that just all blend together, it can feel like a lot of guesswork. But what if there was an actual blueprint, a sort of neurological and psychological guide to learning efficiently? Well, that's what we're aiming for today. We're going to try and extract the core insights from some really serious sources, everything from neuroscience papers to classroom studies, to find strategies you can actually use.
Exactly. We've got a great collection of material. Some of it covers the neurological mechanics, what's actually firing in your brain when you learn. We're also looking at some really specific linguistic research on sound perception, which is, often that first big hurdle. And what I think is crucial, we're analyzing the major theories that guide teaching today, plus the role of what are called socio-emotional skills, which are often, well, completely underestimated.
So if you're curious about how to make your language learning faster, and maybe deeper and more lasting, by focusing on what's been proven to work, both in your head and, I guess, in your heart, then let's get started. Okay, so let's begin with the hardware itself, the human brain. The core concept here, I think, has to be cerebral plasticity, which is, in simple terms, just your brain's amazing ability to physically reorganize itself, to create new connections when you challenge it.
Yeah, and the science on this is so clear. Learning a new language isn't like doing a single math problem. It's a comprehensive, a full body cognitive
A
workout.
workout, I like that.
It is. It activates regions for hearing, for vision, memory, speech, all at the same time.
It really is a symphony then. So the main takeaway for you as a learner is that learning is a physical process.
It absolutely is. When you're wrestling with new vocab or grammar, different parts of your brain are literally building bridges to each other. We can actually map this out. So imagine you hear a new phrase in Spanish. First, Wernicke's area, that's in your temporal lobe, it just leaps into action. It's the interpreter. It figures out the meaning of what you just heard.
So that's comprehension.
That's comprehension. Then, if you want to reply, Broca's area, which is up in the frontal lobe, it takes over. Think of it like the speech producer. It handles the grammar, the structure, and just getting the words out.
And then to make it stick, to actually remember that phrase tomorrow.
Well, that's where the hippocampus comes in. It is absolutely essential for memory consolidation. It helps move that short-term learning into your long-term memory banks.
Wait, hold on. If the hippocampus is so critical for making knowledge long-term, does that mean that cramming for a test the night before is it essentially useless for actually learning?
That is a fantastic question. And according to our sources, the answer is yes. It's largely useless for deep, long-term acquisition.
Wow.
You might pass the test, sure, based on your working memory, but that information is just not going to stick.
Why not?
Because consolidation, that transfer process, it's maximized by a few key things. Repetition, seeing the word in different contexts, and emotional relevance. And critically, the sources all point to the fact that the hippocampus does its most important work during sleep.
So if you pull an all-nighter,
You are actively sabotaging your brain's ability to learn.
that's fascinating. And it brings us perfectly to the three stages of how this processing happens. Stage one is that initial processing,
Yeah.
the working memory.
Right, that's just holding on to the information in real time. It's very fleeting,
Then stage two is that consolidation we just talked about, the transfer to long-term memory.
which requires strategic action, like, actually getting enough sleep.
And then the final goal, stage three, automatic activation and fluency.
Hmm.
This is when you can respond without thinking, without translating in your head. Maybe you even start dreaming in the language.
And that's achieved through a ton of active practice, and specifically something called spaced repetition.
Right? Reviewing things at just the right moment before you forget them. That strengthens the neural connections until they're basically automatic.
And we should probably give a quick mention to the prefrontal cortex. For anyone who speaks more than one language, this part is like the traffic cop.
The traffic cop.
It manages your attention and stops you from, accidentally answering your boss in Spanish when you're supposed to be speaking English.
Okay, yeah.
It keeps the languages from crashing into each other.
Okay, so that's the brain when it's learning something new. But what happens when we throw a huge wrench in the works? I'm talking about the habits and patterns of our first language, our L1. This is where the sound challenge really comes in.
It really does. We're talking about something called phonological awareness. It's basically your brain's ability to hear and work with the distinct sounds, the phonemes of a language.
And your native language has already trained your brain to hear sounds a certain way.
Exactly. So your L1 sound system often interferes when you start in L2.
We should probably clarify a couple of terms here because they're really important for understanding this interference. The difference between an allophone and a phone.
Yes, great point. Think of it like this. A phoneme is a sound that changes the meaning of a word.
Like in English, B and P, bat versus path.
Perfect example. Changed the sound, you changed the meaning. An allophone, on the other hand, is just a slight variation in pronunciation that doesn't change the meaning. It's like having different fonts for the same letter. The letter is still the same.
That makes perfect sense. And this distinction is a huge hurdle, which one of the linguistic studies we looked at really highlights. It involved Brazilian Portuguese speakers who were learning Spanish.
Right. And the challenge is very specific. Brazilian Portuguese, or PB, has a wider range of consonant sounds, and some sounds that are distinct in Spanish are treated as, well, interchangeable allophones in PB.
This study focused on the Spanish R and the trilled R.
Yes. In Spanish, these are different phonemes. For example, cor, which is an old word for to hold versus cor, to run.
That slight difference in the R sound makes it a completely different word.
Completely different. But in Portuguese, those sounds can be variants of the same R, so a learner's brain isn't trained to hear it as a critical difference.
And this is where the finding gets really surprising. The researchers thought the PB speakers would have the most trouble telling R and R apart, but they actually did better than expected on that. The place they really struggled was when sentences were mixed. A bit of Portuguese with a Spanish word dropped in, or vice versa.
Which tells us a couple of things. First, the brain can learn to hear new phonemes, even very similar ones, if you put in conscious effort. But second, the cognitive load, the mental effort of switching between two very similar languages in real time is enormous. Your brain gets jammed up trying to run two different sets of rules at once.
Which speaks directly to this idea in the research called the perceptual assimilation model, or PM.
Right. PM suggests that if a new sound in your second language is too close to a sound you already know, your brain just sort of lumps it into the old category.
And that makes it harder to tell them apart.
Exactly. It takes real, deliberate, high-level consciousness to break that habit. The sources call this the explicit 3 level of consciousness.
What does that mean?
It means you don't just know the sound is different. You can actually explain why it's different. You can teach it. That's when you know you have full conscious control over that new knowledge.
So we've covered the brain structure in the sound challenge. Now let's get practical. How can we use all this to learn better, to learn more efficiently?
Well, all the strategies we found are really about optimizing that cognitive machinery we just talked about,
Okay,
especially consolidation and making things automatic.
okay, so what's first?
First is using multimodal stimuli,
Meaning?
engaging multiple senses. Don't just read a word, write it down by hand, watch a video of someone saying it, listen to it, then say it yourself.
So you're creating more pathways in the brain for that information to be stored.
Precisely. The more sensory pathways, the better the retention. Second is contextual and emotional learning.
So learning things that are actually relevant to your life.
Yes, information tied to a real situation or a positive experience is much more likely to stick. The hippocampus loves context. It helps tag the memory as important.
Then there's the third one, strategic pauses and sleep. We touched on sleep, but the pauses are important too.
Very. Trying to study for hours on end actually hurts your brain's ability to consolidate.
So things like the Pomodoro technique.
Exactly. 25 minutes of intense focus, then a 5-minute break. It gives your working memory a chance to breathe and prepares it for the next bit of information.
And finally, the fourth one, which you said was non-negotiable for fluency.
Spaced repetition. It's just the undisputed champion for fighting the forgetting curve. Reviewing information right before you're about to forget it is scientifically proven to strengthen those neural connections.
Okay, those are the individual tactics.
Okay.
Now let's zoom out a bit to the bigger picture. The theories behind how we should learn. The sources show a pretty clear shift in how professors think about this now.
Oh, a huge shift. We saw a survey where 2 theories just completely dominate the modern approach, leaving the older sort of input-only models behind.
And those were?
The sociocultural theory from Vygotsky that had over 83% support, and the interaction hypothesis from Long with almost 60%.
That's a huge consensus around the sociocultural model. It suggests learning isn't just something that happens inside your own head.
Not at all. Vygotsky's theory is all about the idea that language is acquired through social processes, through collaboration and cultural context.
So using the real world as your classroom?
Absolutely.
Wow.
One professor in the study mentioned using a border region's linguistic diversity as a teaching tool. It's about leveraging the environment you're in.
And the interaction hypothesis, that seems to build on that social idea.
It does. It argues that acquisition is driven by meaningful interaction and something called the negotiation of meaning.
Negotiation of meaning, what's that?
It's that back and forth you have when you don't understand something. When you say, sorry, what was that? Or can you say that another way? Or you try to rephrase what they said.
Ah, the clarification process.
Exactly. That moment of breakdown and repair is incredibly powerful. It forces you to move from just passively understanding to actively using the language to solve a problem. It's the key difference from older models that said just getting enough input was enough. This says the interaction itself is the engine.
That focus on interaction is the perfect bridge to our final component, which might be the most critical of all. The emotional side of learning. We're talking about Krashen's concept of the affective filter.
Right, that metaphorical wall that goes up in your brain when you feel anxious or stressed or embarrassed.
And when that filter is high.
Doesn't it matter how good the lesson is? Your brain literally cannot absorb the information efficiently. This is why socio-emotional skills, or SES, are so incredibly important.
And SES aren't cognitive skills, right? They're
Wrong.
things like,
Things like openness to experience, conscientiousness, emotional stability. They're often based on the big five personality traits. They're the skills that help you manage the emotional journey of learning.
it's so easy to think of emotions as being separate from, or even a barrier to, intellect.
Yeah.
But Vygotsky's theory of emotions argues the complete opposite, doesn't it?
It does. Vygotsky saw emotions as superior psychological functions.
Superior.
Yes. They aren't just reactions. He argued they actively participate in our thinking. When you feel curious and engaged, your focus sharpens, and your brain is more likely to mark that information as important. Shame, on the other hand, triggers an avoidance response. It shuts the system down.
And there's some powerful practical evidence for this from a study in a high school in São Paulo. The students there weren't failing because of grammar. They themselves said their biggest problems were a lack of engagement, a lack of focus, and a lack of curiosity.
And they also said that performing poorly just made them feel more ashamed, which of
Yeah.
course creates a vicious cycle. So the intervention they designed was just brilliant. Instead of more grammar drills, the teachers created a task based on a real-world need, a simulated job interview, all in English.
So it was high stakes, but also safe and collaborative.
And it completely changed the emotional weather in the classroom.
And the results went way beyond just improving their English. Because they had to support each other, it lowered that feeling of shame and created a sense of emotional security.
Exactly. Students reported feeling more confident, more curious, and better able to overcome their initial struggles.
There was that one quote from a student that was so telling.
Oh, yes. The student said, I surpassed the shame a little. I talked more with my colleagues.
A little.
That little bit is a huge cognitive victory. It proves that creating an emotionally safe and relevant environment is what unlocks all that brain machinery we talked about at the beginning.
So we pull all of this together. It seems like there are two sort of parallel tracks to mastering a language effectively.
That's a great way to put it. Track one is optimizing the cognitive machine. Using the neuroscience-backed strategies, spaced repetition, multimodal input, getting enough rest to make sure your brain can actually absorb and automate the information.
And track two is optimizing the environment, creating that ideal socio-emotional landscape through real interaction, emotional safety, and genuine relevance, all to keep that affective filter low and your curiosity high.
And there's one final thought from the sources that sort of reframes the whole goal. They encourage us to stop thinking about proficiency as a finished state and instead to see it through the lens of complex dynamic systems theory.
That sounds very complex.
It sounds it, but the idea is actually very simple and I think very liberating.
Okay.
It just means that language learning is an ongoing, dynamic process of development. You are constantly adapting your language system based on new experiences. Fluency isn't a destination you arrive at.
So it's not a mountain you climb and then you're done.
Exactly. It's a continuous process of engagement and adaptation for your entire life.
So if fluency is never really finished, it's this ongoing dynamic process. Here's a final thought for you to take away. What is one small, relevant, maybe slightly challenging interaction you can seek out today? A conversation, a question you need to ask, some real-world application, something that will engage both your brain and your emotions and strengthen one of those new neural connections. Think dynamically about your journey. Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth look at the science of language mastery.